This program is about unsolved mysteries. Whenever possible, the actual family members and police officials have participated in recreating the events. What you are about to see is not a news broadcast.
Tonight on Unsolved Mysteries, the story of newlywed Shannon Davis, who died in a riding accident. Shannon's husband had purchased secret insurance policies totaling $330,000. In Oklahoma, Eileen Conway died in a mysterious car crash. The Highway Patrol ruled it an accident. Her husband believes she was murdered. In 1928, Glenn and Bessie Hyde vanished on a Grand Canyon river trip. 50 years later, a secret skeleton was found. In Concord, California, housewife Dottie Caylor, terrified of unfamiliar places, summoned the courage to take a train ride. She has never returned. Our four mysteries tonight are connected by common threads: unexplained circumstances, deceit, the suggestion of foul play. At the heart of each is a husband and a wife. These mysteries will be difficult to solve, but the stakes are high when people's lives are involved. Perhaps you can help. We've recreated the events of each story in precise detail in the hope that someone, somewhere, knows the truth. Join me. You may be able to help solve a mystery. On July 23, 1980, in a small Michigan farming community, newlyweds Dave and Shannon Davis prepared to go for a sunset horseback ride. Within an hour, Shannon was dead. According to Dave, Shannon was not an experienced rider. When they reached the edge of the woods, she lost control and fell off the horse, striking her head violently on the ground. Dave's simple and plausible story was immediately accepted by the couple's family and friends.
I felt that Shannon's marriage was made in heaven. I really felt this. I had began to love David.
I described him probably to a lot of people as a man's man. He was an outdoor person, hunting, fishing. He just was very manly and very likable.
And she'd say, "Isn't he neat, Mom?" And I thought he was neat. I thought he would protect her from anything. I had no idea of what he was really like.
After Shannon's death, Bob and Lucille Moore began to discover that Dave Davis was not the man he seemed to be. They began to find clues in Dave's behavior, which led them to believe that their daughter's death was not an accident. Dave Davis has now disappeared. There's a warrant out for his arrest. But the Moores are afraid that their son-in-law may have gotten away with a perfect crime. At the hospital, Shannon was pronounced dead of the injuries caused by her fall. Minutes later, Shannon's parents were surprised and upset when Dave insisted that their daughter's body be cremated.
I said, "Can we take Shannon back to Toledo for burial?"
Please, let's take her back to Toledo. Let's take her home.
That's not what she wanted.
I suppose our voices were getting a little bit loud because I don't believe in cremation. I knew Shannon didn't want that.
This is what she wanted.
I felt so strongly that if he was going to insist on it, I was going to go try and find a judge and get a temporary restraining order to stop him from doing it.
That night, Lucille couldn't sleep. She remembered that her husband Bob had caught Dave in a lie about life insurance.
Bob says, "David, do you have insurance on Shannon?" He said no. And it just shot right through me. I remembered Shannon coming home from her honeymoon the very next day, saying David took out a large life insurance on me. That was the first lie I picked up.
Three days later, Shannon was buried. Bob and Lucille Moore noticed that Dave seemed unmoved.
I blessed the body of Shannon with the holy water.
After the funeral, Shannon's parents found out that Dave had lived a life of deceit. He bragged that he'd been wounded in Vietnam. His own parents said he was never in the service.
Well, all of this was crowding in on me, and all I could think inside is, David, did you kill my daughter? And it just was there. I knew that he had murdered my daughter. I didn't know what to do with it. I felt ashamed. I just felt like I was going crazy inside.
2 days after the burial, 6 separate insurance companies contacted the funeral home, requesting copies of Shannon's death certificate. Her death left Dave Davis the beneficiary of $330,000. Bob Moore then discovered that Dave may have been involved in other insurance scams.
He burnt the farm down across the road, and he had other fires and the fake injury from when he worked for the automotive company. So I think he was just out to live on insurance money, and he just kept getting bigger and bigger all the time. He started out with a simple fire, and now he was up to the point where he was going to collect big insurance.
At Bob and Lucille Moore's insistence, Shannon's body was exhumed. The medical examiner found the injuries on the body consistent with a fall from a horse. Indications of an unknown drug, however, were found in Shannon's body, but the medical report still ruled Shannon's death an accident. 3 months later, an article in the Detroit Free Press exposed Dave's alleged insurance swindles. The case was reopened, and Dave moved to Florida. Detective Don Brooks was assigned to the investigation.
And the information that was contained in that newspaper article was phenomenal. I thought if this is even 50% accurate, we're on to something here.
Brooks contacted the toxicologist who had earlier found traces of the unknown drug in Shannon's body.
I explained to him that we had a very large number of chemicals that we were looking at. There's over 250,000 chemicals in common use. And we had searched for and ruled out maybe 1,000. And I said, what I need is some help.
Is that the hematograph right there?
This is it. You see the peak is right here. And you see how nice and clean it is? Because it's so clean, that means that I think it's a drug. Mm-hmm. This is important to the case. It's got to be if we can identify what that is.
He asked me, actually, for information about Davis's background. And one of the things I told him was that he was a dirt farmer. And he had some large animals on the farm. Dr. Forney and I then discussed the idea of contacting veterinarians in the area that may have serviced Dave Davis.
I'm Don Brooks with the State Police. I talked with you a little bit earlier.
That's right, Don. Listen,
I happened to ask 2 or 3 of the different vets in the area if they knew of any drugs that may affect the muscular system or the nervous system that they would use on large farm animals. And when I did so, one of the veterinarians I talked to provided me the name of a drug.
Dr. Forney tested that drug, an animal tranquilizer. It matched perfectly the sample taken from Shannon's body. Now Brooks needed to connect the drug to Dave Davis.
We were able to determine that several years ago, Dave Davis took part in a deer hunting camp at which members of the camp used this drug to hunt deer with bow and arrows.
Shannon was exhumed a second time. 2 injection marks were found, one on Shannon's shoulder and one on her wrist.
Don Brooks called, and he said, bingo, they found Shannon is injected with something. And we're going to move now. We're going to get him.
On October 13th, 1981, a grand jury issued a first-degree murder warrant for Dave Davis. Detective Brooks believes that Dave Davis pushed or coaxed Shannon off her horse, wrestled her to the ground, then paralyzed her with a lethal tranquilizer. Brooks believes that Dave then struck her head on a rock so that the injuries would appear accidental.
I don't think there's any question that this is premeditated murder. I believe he married Shannon Davis to kill her and to profit.
I want to get him, and I want him to see him locked up. And I want him to feel at all times that we're breathing right down his back, because I will not let go. That can't bring her back, but put him away before he does it to some other girl, and he will. He will.
After our broadcast, a viewer recognized Dave Davis as an acquaintance living in American Samoa, a small island in the South Pacific. Davis was arrested 9 days later by FBI agents. At the time of his arrest, Davis was living in this house with a 20-year-old Samoan wife. He told her that his first wife had died in a tragic accident. 3.5 weeks later, Davis was returned to Michigan to stand trial for murder.
Any comment on the charges against you, Mr. Davis?
I didn't do it.
Police say your wife was poisoned.
I didn't do it.
After only 2.5 hours of deliberation, a Michigan jury convicted Dave Davis of first-degree murder. For Shannon's parents, the verdict brought an end to their 9-year struggle for justice.
This is what we waited for, and we got what we wanted. He's going to be locked up the rest of his life. That's what we wanted.
But we'll go on the rest of our life missing her. That's what I said. He gave us the death penalty. Now we're giving it to him.
Last September, we presented the mystery of George Marsh, a Kansas City laborer who died alone in a nursing home in 1982. He had no known heirs or relatives, but he left behind a legacy of $175,000. We hope that someone watching the broadcast might have known George Marsh or his heirs. There were a few clues: a birth certificate showing that George Marsh had changed his name from Joseph ZELENKA, and some family photos, including this portrait of a young woman, inscribed "Your loving niece, Eleanor."
When I looked up and saw my senior high school picture on TV, I couldn't believe it. So then when he read "Your loving niece, Eleanor," that's how it was signed, I was just stunned. I was just amazed. And then the very next picture was Uncle Joe. And I said, my gosh, that's Uncle Joe.
This woman, Eleanor TOLAR, is George Marsh's long-lost niece in the high school photo. The ZELENKA family lives in Rock Springs, Wyoming. Joseph's brother Jim has been looking for Joe since 1931.
I never know, no idea why he kept away from the family. Because there was no hard feelings. We were all united, always, in everything.
The ZELENKAs are currently waiting for a final judgment from the public administrator's office in Kansas City. Jim and Eleanor plan to divide the $175,000 among Joe's surviving relatives. But more importantly, they want to preserve Joe's memory. They intend to bring his body back to the family burial site.
The money, it don't mean as much as finding out where he's at. I just feel good all over to know that I located him and know where he's at, and I'd be able to bring his body back to rest with the rest of his family.
In our next story, we'll meet a man who returned home to find his house empty, the bathtub full of water, the phone off the hook, and his wife missing. April 29th, 1986, 10:40 a.m. A farmer in rural Oklahoma notices an ominous plume of smoke rising from a nearby road. He called the authorities, and 20 minutes later, the Oklahoma Highway Patrol arrived at the scene. They found a burning car embedded in a deserted bridge. The heat was so intense that the car had actually melted into the metal guardrail into which it had crashed.
When the Highway Patrol arrived, a body was inside the car at the time, but it was a futile exercise whatsoever to try to get to the occupants in the car due to the car had already burned so bad.
By the time the flames subsided, the body behind the wheel was burned beyond recognition. Skid marks indicated that the car's speed at impact was 50 to 60 miles per hour. To the Highway Patrol, it seemed like just another senseless accident.
100 feet.
A computer check revealed the car belonged to Pat Conway, who lived with his family in Lawton, Oklahoma, 15 miles from the crash site. The next day, the victim was identified as Pat's wife of 33 years, Aileen. The Oklahoma Highway Patrol ruled Aileen Conway's death as a one-vehicle fatality accident. Within hours of the crash, however, a number of mysterious discrepancies emerged, which led Pat Conway to believe that his wife had, in fact, been the victim of foul play.
There's no doubt in my mind it was murder. And if I live to be 100 years old, I'll still be pushing to try to find the individual, or possibly two individuals, whoever was involved.
Pat first became suspicious when he returned home a few hours after the accident. The patio door was wide open. Aileen's purse, which she always carried with her, was sitting by an armchair. Her driver's license and glasses were still in it. An ironing board was set up and the iron had been left on. Water from a garden hose was running into the backyard swimming pool. And most significantly, in the master bathroom at the back of the house, the tub was still full of water. And the phone was off the hook.
The thing that really got my attention was the phone being off the hook, as though she'd attempted to make a phone call, possibly the police department. We have no way of knowing who. Between me and the kids, one would see one thing and one another, and we start putting it together, and right away we find out, well, there was no accident at all.
Another disturbing detail nagged at Pat. What was Aileen doing out on that lonely country road? Neither of them had ever been in the area, and there was certainly no reason for Aileen to be there by herself. Nothing about his wife's death made sense. Pat contacted Ray Anderson at the district attorney's office.
The first impression that I had of this case when I met with Mr. Conway was that of a spouse that was left alone and behind, not expecting the tragedy that happened and looking for an excuse or looking for some reason why this happened other than just being an accident. However, when you start looking at the extenuating and surrounding circumstances, the way that she left her house, then it leads you to believe that there is a possibility that there could be foul play. Pat, you want to take that side of the road, and I'll take this side, just kind of look for anything that might look familiar or unusual.
A few days later, Pat and Ray Anderson went to the crash site, looking for clues, any clue.
Pat, could you come over here a minute?
200 feet from the bridge, they found a church bulletin in the grass.
Looks familiar to you?
Yeah, this is the church building out of our car from the previous Sunday, and it was on the dash of the car.
Are you sure that's out of your car, you think?
Yeah, I'm positive. There's no doubt that's where it was.
Aileen always drove with the windows rolled up and the air conditioning turned on. The bulletin could not have flown out of a moving car. The car would had to have been stopped.
Someone else may have been with her, opened the door, set the accelerator, and slammed it into drive, hoping to run Mrs. Conway off into the creek and to make it appear as though it was an accident.
As a result of Anderson's investigation, the Lawton District Attorney changed the official cause of death from accidental to unexplained. The DA then asked the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation and the State Fire Marshal to evaluate the likelihood of arson.
What made me suspicious at first was looking at the photographs and seeing how much burn that was in the vehicle. This thing was completely burnt, destroyed. The burn was similar to that where gasoline or something like that was used in it. And another thing that brought my curiosity up was the fact that the gas cap was missing. And most arson cases, and this is documented, of a vehicle, the gas cap is removed. And that was the case here.
Informal burn tests on dashboard and upholstery samples from a car similar to Aileen's suggest the inside of her car may have been doused with gasoline.
We took the material and we applied a blowtorch to it, set the material on fire, then removed the blowtorch, and the fire went out, which is consistent with a flame retardant type material. And then we took some gasoline and soaked the material, and then of course the thing was completely destroyed. And the point being, without some type of an accelerant like gasoline, the fire would not burn that bad.
If Aileen Conway was murdered on the bridge that day, one question still remains. Why?
We don't really have an answer for what put her out there. A lot of theories floating around. Perhaps she interrupted a burglary. We backtracked a little bit into the neighborhood, and apparently there had been reports of burglaries in the weeks and months preceding this situation. So the possibility of an interrupted burglary is there.
It had to be robbery. Whoever came in didn't know she was here, and once they found out she was here, they didn't want to leave her to identify them. So then this makes murders out of them.
If this case is solved, it'll be because that there'll be somebody that talks. There'll be somebody that admits their involvement in this. And of course, I'm a firm believer that that's what normally captures the criminals, is their inability to keep their mouth shut.
No one knows exactly what happened to Aileen Conway on a remote country bridge in Oklahoma that day. A year later, Pat Conway is still searching for answers.
Even though you're discouraged, you keep pushing it every day. You constantly think about it when you go to bed of a night or get up in the morning. It's on your mind all the time. But somehow it needs to be solved. I'll never quit as far as trying to solve the case.
Next, the story of Glenn and Bessie Hyde, who disappeared on a perilous rafting trip on the Colorado River. Both were assumed lost until a woman claiming to be Bessie Hyde said she murdered her husband. Cuts through the Grand Canyon, a perilous stretch of water that was once considered the most dangerous in the world. In 1928, two newlyweds set out to navigate these treacherous whitewater rapids. They were never seen again. Emery Kolb, a Grand Canyon photographer, was one of the last people to see them alive. 50 years later, when Kolb died, authorities were surprised by a gruesome discovery in his boathouse on the rim of the canyon. Hidden in a canoe was a single human skeleton that appeared to have suffered a violent death. Whose bones were these, and how did the victim die?
One good option would be that the individual met death by homicide. A second option would be suicide. It would be nice to know who this individual was. I mean, somebody is missing. Somebody was out there, and there may be friends or relatives who would very much like to know who it is.
The disappearance of the honeymoon couple and the discovery of the human remains in the boathouse happened almost 50 years apart. Yet they were connected by an article in an Idaho newspaper and by the Arizona law authorities. They suggested that the bones might be those of the adventurous young river rafter, Glenn Hyde. Tonight, we'll examine these mysteries of the Grand Canyon. What happened to Glenn Hyde and his bride, Bessie? Is their disappearance connected to the secret of the bones in the boathouse? Glenn and Bessie Hyde were married in Twin Falls, Idaho on April 10, 1928. Glenn was 27 and Bessie just 18 years old. That fall, they built a boat for a special honeymoon adventure, a trip down the Colorado River to California through the dangerous Grand Canyon. Glenn was a thrill seeker. This journey would mean instant notoriety.
Glenn wanted to make a record run through the Grand Canyon. He wanted to do it in a homemade boat. He wanted to do it with a new bride who had never been on rivers before, and he wanted to do it without life jackets. In the fall of the year, about 6 months after they were married, they were in Green River, Utah. An experienced riverman at Green River looked at the boat, and he thought it looked to him like a coffin. It was unlike anything that had run down the Colorado before.
The Hydes took 26 days to get from Utah to the Bright Angel Trail in the heart of the Grand Canyon, a new record. With the most dangerous stretch still ahead, they stopped to see Emery Kolb, who had already twice navigated the Colorado River Rapids. Kolb had arrived at the canyon in 1902 and set about documenting its grandeur. His stunning photographs and immense knowledge of the river soon made Emery Kolb a legend.
He was very enthusiastic about his river trips and so proud of them. Everybody that I know that was interested in the river at all the years I was there, first came and talked to Emery Kolb.
Frankly, I just don't think you should go. No woman has ever traveled the river from this point.
When the Hydes visited Kolb, Bessie had grown tired of the river trip.
Now, especially the idea of not taking life jackets.
Emery tried to warn them of the certain dangers ahead. He asked them to stay with him through the winter and postpone their trip until the weather improved.
Glenn, I just don't think...
He even offered the couple his own life jackets, but Glenn refused all Kolb's offers.
There's really no reason to fear. Both Bessie and I are good, strong swimmers. Come on, Bessie, the light will be fading.
Mr. Kolb told me that he tried his best everywhere in the world to talk him out of going. He said, you have no idea what you're getting into. He said, I've been there and I know what it's like. He begged them to take life preservers and even inner tubes, and Glenn flat refused. He said that I'm going to do it without or else.
Two days later, Glenn and Bessie disappeared. Army aviators flew into the canyon and spotted the empty boat below Diamond Creek. Emery Kolb was asked to lead the search party to find the lost couple. Surprisingly, when he discovered the boat, it was undamaged.
Glenn! Bessie!
The boat seemed to be intact. The clothes, food, Glenn's rifle was on board. camera with exposed film. There's a very sketchy diary, but a diary that Bessie Hyde had been keeping was on board. They found everything there except for the people. There's no sign of them.
The bodies of Glenn and Bessie Hyde were never recovered. 50 years later, the discovery of the bones in Cobb's boathouse fueled speculation. Could these be the remains of Glenn Hyde?
Right now.
And how are they connected to Emery Cobb?
We'll get him examined.
The authorities turned the skeleton over to Dr. Walter BIRKBY, an expert in the science of identifying human remains. He discovered that the bones are of a male Caucasian, 20 to 23 years of age, 6 feet tall with light brown hair. Dr. BIRKBY also discovered a bullet embedded in the skull.
What we found out from the bullet that was removed from the skull was that not only was this a .32 caliber projectile, it came from a revolver that began manufacture in about 1902.
2.1 centimeters.
The production date of the gun and clothing fragments found with the skeleton suggest that death occurred in the 1920s. During that time, only 2 people, Glenn and Bessie Hyde, are known to have disappeared in the Grand Canyon.
Stature estimate. Somewhere along the line, I heard a rumor to the effect that Emery Cobb could have murdered Glenn Hyde in order that he could have, I guess, beautiful Bessie. It's so preposterous that I just can't believe it, that he would off somebody and then keep the damn body around. You got verticality on these mirrors?
Yes.
We're gonna have to rotate that more to the left.
Dr. BIRKBY hoped to put the rumors to rest.
More yet, more yet.
He superimposed a photograph of Glenn over the skull to precisely compare bone structure.
Even more, even more.
This was the only way to determine if the skeleton was indeed Glenn Hyde's.
Right there, hold it. The skull is of a different shape than the face of Glenn Hyde. The eye orbits themselves are angled in a different direction than Glenn Hyde's. The cheeks are wider. Even the shape of the chin is wrong. Glenn Hyde's chin was somewhat rounded, as we can see on the photograph, whereas the chin of the submitted skull tends to be fairly squared off. So those features alone do not match. These remains, these bones that were submitted for analyses are not the remains of Glenn Hyde, period. End of story.
But the story, in fact, does go on, and the mystery deepens. If the bones did not belong to Glenn Hyde, then what happened to Glenn and Bessie? The answer may lie in the eyewitness reports that claim Bessie Hyde is still alive and that she was seen back in the Grand Canyon, retracing the steps of her ill-fated honeymoon adventure 43 years after she disappeared. In 1971, an unknown woman took a 20-day rafting trip through the canyon. Geologist George Billingsley was also in the party.
She was a very serious person. She was always just watching the canyon and helping out a little bit around camp, all the time wanting to do something, and fairly happy, but quiet, and pretty much to herself.
Towards the end of the trip, they made camp at Diamond Creek,
So it was right around the corner there where Emery Cobb
the same spot where Glenn and Bessie's boat had been found 4 decades earlier.
You know, to this day we have
That evening, a river guide told the legend of the missing couple, and the woman, matter-of-factly, revealed her true identity.
I'm Bessie Hyde.
She told us seriously enough to where we wasn't sure what else to say,
Killed him.
but we all figured she was just making up her own story.
How?
But later on, you know, we got to thinking, now maybe she really was Bessie because the age was
I
right.
got a knife and I
And she
stabbed
never
him.
smiled when she said what she said, as if she really knew.
Well, it was right along here we had a bad fight, and he beat me up.
According to the woman, Glenn was obsessed with completing the trip, no matter how dangerous. When she tried to leave, a fight erupted.
I got the full name of the woman and eventually contacted her back in Ohio. But when I asked her about the Hydes and their disappearance, she denied everything. She said she hadn't told the story. She said she didn't know anybody named Hyde, and she said she wasn't Bessie Hyde. My gut feeling, though, is that she was.
The mysteries surrounding this story still remain unsolved. If the bones in Emery Cobb's boathouse are not Glenn Hyde's, whose are they? And why did Cobb keep them hidden in that canoe for so many years? The mysteries have survived the years, and for now, they remain part of the legend of the Grand Canyon. Next, the story of a woman trapped in her house by agoraphobia, the irrational fear of unknown people and places. Strangely, she has vanished. The Bay Area Rapid Transit System, known to commuters as the BART trains, that link San Francisco with the East Bay cities. On June 12, 1985, JULE Caylor drove his wife Dottie to the BART station in Pleasant Hill, California, 18 miles from Oakland. She entered the station and purchased a ticket, a simple task performed each day by millions. But this was a test of courage for Dottie Caylor. Dottie suffers from agoraphobia, an irrational, overwhelming fear of being in public places. Facing the unknown and the possibility of panic shadows every step. No one knows if Dottie overcame her fear that day and actually boarded the train. What is certain is that for 2.5 years, there's been no trace of Dottie Caylor.
Oh, after the first few days, I thought that she had left temporarily to, well, simply make things inconvenient for me.
I think that Dottie could have disappeared to get even with her husband, who had disappeared on her for half of their married life. She could have done that in the beginning. It's very hard to imagine her doing that for a great long period of time.
Immediately after she disappeared, Dottie's friends wondered why a woman so afraid of the unknown would leave behind everything she had and everyone she knew. At first, they thought she may have left to escape an unhappy marriage and start a new life in another city. But as the months and years elapsed, there was no word from Dottie. Holidays, birthdays, and anniversaries went by. Now Dottie's friends and family are wondering, could she really have vanished voluntarily, or was her disappearance more sinister? In 1973, Dottie married JULE Caylor, an entomologist with the National Forest Service. They settled in the Oakland suburb of Concord. But over the years, her home became a self-imposed prison.
Dottie had what doctors have called agoraphobia. She would stay inside most of the time. She couldn't even apply for a job, much less hold one down. It was a real problem.
Dottie and Jule's marriage deteriorated. Dottie was often home alone because Jule was working out of town over 50% of the time. Then in November of 1981, the relationship erupted in violence.
She told me that they got in an argument. It escalated to the point where he finally hit her with a board or something, and she received a wound in her head, and that she did grab some scissors and said, "You keep away from me," and protected herself.
And she was standing over top of me with those scissors.
Jule says that Dottie started the fight.
Swearing at me and saying, "I'll kill you "You son of a bitch, I'll kill you." And I grabbed her little typing stand and hit her with it.
Dottie needed to pull together the threads of her disintegrating life. So in 1984, she joined a support group called Women in Transition. Without ever telling JULE, she attended meetings for over a year.
I met her in the fall, and of course the last time I saw her was in late spring, and I thought she'd made a tremendous amount of progress, actually.
As time went on, I would notice she's adding a little more color to her outfits. She is taking a little more care with her hair. She cut her hair in a new style, which was a very scary thing for her. It was as if a new Dottie were emerging.
She had secret lives, a secret existence that I knew nothing about. And she wanted it that way. She pursued that. I only began to become aware of it, near the time that she disappeared. I wasn't even aware of it. I was just suspicious.
Dottie secretly rented a post office box so she could receive mail without JULE's knowledge. She opened a personal bank account and transferred $5,000 into a cashier's check. Then, 1 month before Dottie disappeared, JULE told her he had to accept a job transfer to Salt Lake City.
Dottie had said, in the event that I got transferred, that she was not interested in going with me. So I wasn't expecting her to go with me, and wouldn't even have wanted her to, I guess.
According to JULE, on Wednesday, June 12th, Dottie set off on an overnight trip. He drove her to the Pleasant Hill BART station.
I took her down to the BART station. She had with her a little overnight bag.
Goodbye, Jule.
And I dropped her off. And she walked around the corner of the station and disappeared.
JULE is certain that Dottie had her purse as well as her overnight bag as she walked into the station for the last time. But he can't be sure that Dottie ever boarded the train. The next day, around noon, JULE returned home early from work and got off the train at the Concord BART station. In the parking lot, he was surprised to find Dottie's Volkswagen next to his car.
So I walked over and looked inside, and then I noticed her purse, and that was very, very strange.
She told me how important it was to her to have her purse with her all the time. She felt secure if she felt she had a lot of her things with her, and she felt safe out in the world. That's one of the things that made me feel so terribly upset when I realized that she had not taken her purse with her.
JULE left a note on Dottie's car asking her to contact him. Over the next 4 days, he left 2 more notes, talking about problems he was having with the house. He also expressed his love and pleaded with her to come home.
I spoke to Jule, and Jule told me that he hadn't seen her for 3 or 4 days, and he didn't know where she was, and that her car was there, her purse was there, and he didn't know where she was. I was extremely upset. I asked him if he'd called the police, and he said that he had not. And this made me just almost hysterical.
5 days after Dottie vanished, JULE filed a missing persons report with the Bay Area Rapid Transit Police. The following day, the Concord Police Department was finally notified of Dottie's disappearance. Not by JULE, but by the BART police. 2 weeks after Dottie vanished, JULE moved to Salt Lake City, where he still lives and works. Back in Concord, Diane hired a private investigator, Francie KOEHLER.
Hi, I'm Francie Caylor. The status of the case at this point is I view it as 10% missing persons case and 90% potential foul play.
As their attempts to locate Dottie turned up no new leads, Diane and Francie started to worry that Dottie might be dead. They began to consider JULE a suspect
We don't know for sure if Dottie ever got to the BART station. The only one that has reported that Dottie went to the BART station is her husband, Jule. We don't know if she ever got there.
If this proves to be anything other than a straight disappearance case, Jule will be a suspect in her disappearance or in her death, whatever it may be, along with anybody else that may have been close to her at the time or prior to her disappearance.
You would certainly consider those around that person as being possible suspects. No, that doesn't bother me at all. I suspect that she either willfully disappeared and then was helped to permanently disappear, or perhaps just got in with the wrong person right at the start.
2.5 years have passed, and still no one knows if Dottie Caylor built a secret life for herself to escape an unhappy marriage, or if she was simply the victim of foul play.
I think there's a chance that Dottie is dead, which is very disturbing to think about. I have many dreams about this, and the authorities I speak to and the friends I speak to come up with hundreds of ideas. There's no peace, there's no rest, there's no conclusion, and we won't forget her.
It was hell living with Dottie. It was hell having her disappear the way that she did. And yet, since I've gotten here and gotten settled and into a new job, and that whole problem is behind me, things are really pretty good.
Tonight's mysteries are stories without endings, all missing that one vital clue. Perhaps someone watching tonight knows what happened and can reveal the truth. Perhaps it's you.